Welcome to another episode of Wildomar Conversations. As you know, we're always on the lookout for stories that the community will be interested in. When I was at a recent event down in Temecula, I first learned of Lund blades. When I found out they were from Wildomar, I thought to myself, this is time for another Wildomar Conversation. So let's toss it over to Bridgette, where she will be interviewing Casey and Carla Lund.
Good morning, my name is Bridgette Moore and I'm councilwoman with the city of Wildomar. Today I'm here with Carla and Casey Lund from Lund Blades. And Lund Blades are made right here in Wildomar. So good morning.
Good morning, Bridgette. How are you?
Good, thank you for sitting here and speaking with us. So tell us, how and when did your interest in blades start?
I would say back in high school, probably in the mid to late 80s, probably B-movies. It was really swords I was interested in. I went to a custom knife show, met a knife maker there. He had Jim Hersulis, and he had written a book called The Complete Bladesmith. I bought the book, and it was pre-internet time, so it was probably around 1989. So you either could find it in the library, or someone had to write a book, and he wrote one of the first of the books to be out there. And it cascaded from there. I started and didn't stop, and just kept growing, as a hobby and then into a business as I got a little older.
That's incredible that you were able to self-teach yourself. You're self-taught through a book, which I like how you mentioned that this is pre-Google.
It was a lot of trips to libraries, driving around, going to different libraries. Luckily, where I grew up around the LA area, there's libraries everywhere. So looking for blacksmithing books. There really weren't many on knife making. And then meeting people in a knife club, eventually learning about the American Bladesmithing Society, other friends, usually older gentlemen, that kind of helped me out through the years.
I like whenever you start getting into something, some passion, and you find out that there are these other clubs that I haven't heard of that club before, and so that you find out there's all these other individuals that have your same passion. So can you kind of tell us what is the process to make a blade or a sword?
Well, there's a lot of different ways to go about it. Easiest way is to buy steel. If you're going to make what they would call a mono steel blade, it's a single one steel. Another method is you're using multiple steels and you're welding them together in the forge or under the hammer, heating them up, hitting them together, they stick together. That steel's layered like a puff pastry, and it gives you different patterns in the steel. They call it Damascus or pattern welded steel. That's the hard process. It takes a lot more time than just shaping one from a bar of steel that you buy.
But I understand you do the little bit harder part because you actually make your own steel.
Yeah, I tend, a good chunk of my blades, especially sword blades, are almost always Damascus steel. So they're the layered steel. I start off with big 3-inch round bar, and it gets forged down into flat plates, 2 different steels, and those are then stacked, welded, and usually a 25 pound bar. I work under the hammer, and that gets stretched out, and that'll get you a few swords by the time you're done with it. But it's just layering and layering the steel. So you're stretching it out, cutting it into multiple pieces, stacking it back up, and it could be twisted like a screw, where while it's hot, it's twisted. That's some of the more complex stuff, and then those can be put back together. So there's a lot of different methods of making them.
And then you get the heat treating.
Well, and then from there, then you go into the heat treating. So once you shape the blade, you rough grind it to shape on a belt grinder. Then it goes to the heat treating section. And here in the shop, I use high and low temperature molten salts. So those run anywhere from 2,000 degrees down to 300 degrees. The blade will be heated up in one salt, then quenched in another salt, just like on some of the shows you see on TV, where they're quenching from a forge, heating up the blade, quenching into oil. I'm doing it in molten salts. They're all digitally controlled, so I have really accurate temperature controls for the type of steels I work with.
So it sounds like a lot of time. There's a long process.
It is. There's a lot more to it. There's so many different machines that you need in order to do each process. A lot can be done by hand, but to run a business that way, you need to be able to increase your productivity. So the big equipment I have in the shop here really helps along with that and allows it to be, a viable business.
So do you have an estimate? I know it sounds like it ranges because of what you're making, but would you estimate 40 hours a week for one blade? Or?
Well, for a knife, I'm usually working in batches. So if it's semi-custom knives, I really don't take custom knife orders. It'll be a general, like I want a hunter Okay, what kind of wood? All right, well then I might make 12 of those. So that cuts some of the hours down.
Okay.
For the recent one we just did, which we finished when COVID hit, so that was a big hindrance. But we did 500 of those knives,
Okay.
and that's called the backup. Okay. And that was just a mono steel blade, a single stainless steel blade. I designed to hide behind a trauma plate on a vest, or behind a vest, or a tactical vest. Real thin blade. Those were all done, in stages, but 500 was quite a bit.
That was just one order. That was from one customer?
That was one order we did for ourselves to sell
okay.
as our start of our first line of knives. And then slowly we're working into other lines. It's just tooling up the machinery, the research and development to get another style of knife done. Takes quite a bit of time.
And so, but besides the knives, you're doing swords?
Swords are very time intensive. I do a lot of bare blades and also blades that are fitted out with the hilts. Usually Western European swords, like medieval knight sword. And those, when I finish them, those are usually going to customers that are practitioners. They're actually using them and cutting competitions, things like that.
So it's interesting. There's so much different facets to this. What are your kind of future goals for Casey Lund Blades?
I'd like to grow it. I will be able to spend, next year, I'll be able to spend full time in the shop, getting a few more machines up and running. They're older machines, but they need to be fixed, and that should help increase productivity quite a bit. So the plan is to just keep growing the business and start bringing out new lines, moving into also culinary.
Okay.
I like to cook. Big fan of that.
Okay.
And we did, I think it was 800 or so knives for my friend Adam Perry Lang, his restaurant in Hollywood. And so that was the start into how do you make hundreds of knives all at once. So I had to learn all the industrial processes. So that's what we want to continue with.
And Carly, you help with the business? With the marketing, the sales?
Yeah,
Okay.
marketing, sales, shipping, all the behind the stuff. He's a, maker, and I do support in the other ways.
Exactly. No, that's totally needed. So when you said next year, so are you looking at retirement? Is that why next year is full time?
Yeah, I retire next February.
Okay.
So.
Well, congratulations. So
Thank you.
What are you doing right now?
I'm a deputy with Riverside County Sheriff's Department.
Yeah. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for keeping us safe.
Thanks.
So Carla, how do you sell the products then? So he makes them, and then how does it get out to the community?
We do a lot of community events and internet. So we've just revamped our website and social media. So that's been basically how we're getting the word out there.
Okay. What's the website?
CaseyLundBlades.com.
CaseyLundBlades.com. And I just
The two letters.
2 letters, K and a C.
Okay. Yep. Casey and Carla, right? Is that what it is?
That's actually my middle name, but it works out.
Oh, it works out. Okay.
It works out perfect, yes.
So you had a mentor, I believe, too.
Jim Hersulis was my initial mentor. That few times I would drive out to Nevada where he was at. There weren't many local bladesmiths, at that time. So I pestered him nonstop at all the knife shows I could go to. Then you would start meeting the other makers, and sometimes, phone calls, things like that. You would get help from them. Hey, I'm trying to do this. And everyone was always very helpful. Every bladesmith I've ever run into has been more than open and willing to share. So, and just cascaded from there.
And is that the advice you would give future bladesmithers to do?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. One thing for them to remember, though, is a lot of guys are running a business, so they don't have time. So, respect their time if you do get a hold of one and they're willing to give you some help. Also, the different clubs. There's the American Bladesmith Society. There's California Knife Makers Association. Okay. And I'm sure there's an association in every state out there.
Okay.
So you can find someone, and especially with the internet, there's so much information available. Just, it's hard because they don't know, is it good information or is it bad information? Talk to a knife maker, join a club, and that's going to be one of your best ways for them to start.
And when did you move to Wildomar?
Bought this house in 2000.
Okay.
So 22 years ago. And I specifically bought in Wildomar so I could build the shop.
Okay. So we're sitting here today
at
their shop. So thank you very much. Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, just thanks for having us. And It was great.
Thank you. Thank you for spending the time today at Wildomar Conversations.